Cook answers the phone in German near the boss. The next day a letter arrives at her house. Sarah Miller was in the middle of lunch when the old kitchen phone rang insistently. It was an ordinary day at the small restaurant in the Astoria neighborhood of New York City, where she had worked for 5 years preparing simple dishes for the local workers. The voice on the other end of the line was desperate, speaking German with a heavy accent. Sarah felt her heart race when she heard the words she had long feared. Someone was looking for Elizabeth Vogel, her mother. Bitte, bitte, ich brauche Elizabeth Vogel. Ist sehr wichtig, shouted the voice of an elderly woman. Sarah looked around and saw that Arthur, the restaurant owner, had stopped at the kitchen door with a completely stunned expression. Her hands trembled as she held the yellow receiver, but she couldn't resist. Meine Mutter ist... Sie ist nicht hier, she replied in perfect German, trying to keep her voice low. Arthur took 2 steps back, as if he had been punched. In 5 years working together, he had never known Sarah spoke German. In fact, he didn't even know she had a German mother. The voice on the other end of the line stopped abruptly when Sarah confirmed she was Elizabeth's daughter. For a few seconds, only the woman's heavy breathing could be heard. Ach, mein Gott. You're Sari? Little Sari? The voice changed completely, breaking with emotion. I don't know who you are, ma'am, Sarah whispered, feeling tears well up. I'm your grandmother, my child. Your Grandma Martha. I really need to talk to you. Write down this address. Sarah quickly wrote the address on a piece of bread paper, but when she looked up, the call had dropped. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Arthur stared at her with a mix of confusion and worry. Sarah, you speak German? He asked, still processing what he had witnessed. She wiped her tears with her apron and returned to the stove, trying to act normal. I learned a few words at a language school, she lied, stirring the burgers harder than necessary. Arthur wasn't a fool. He had known Sarah since she arrived at the restaurant, a young woman of 23 with no family, no references, just a letter of recommendation from a former employer. He had always noticed how reserved she was about her past, but he respected her privacy. Sarah, that wasn't the talk of someone who learned a few words. You spoke like someone who grew up speaking German. She stopped stirring the burgers and turned to him. Her brown eyes were red, and Arthur sensed something very deep was happening. Mr. Arthur, please, don't ask any more, not now. The rest of the day passed in a tense atmosphere. Sarah burned the fries twice, something that had never happened, and dropped a dessert plate on the floor. Arthur tried to talk to her a few times, but she always changed the subject. When the restaurant closed at 6 in the evening, Sarah grabbed her things and left earlier than usual. She lived in a small house behind a working-class row, a 15-minute walk from work. It was a simple place, but she had turned it into a home over the past few years. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the paper where she had written the address. 1247 Broadway, apartment 82. It was in the Upper West Side, a neighborhood she only knew by passing through. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. The memories Sarah had buried for so many years began to surface. She vaguely remembered her mother Elizabeth speaking German to her when she was little, before everything fell apart. She remembered the day they arrived in the United States. She was only 4 years old, scared, and not understanding why they had left everything behind. Elizabeth never properly explained what had happened in Germany. She would only say they needed a fresh start, that the past was behind them. For years, Sarah tried to ask about the family, about the father she barely remembered, but Elizabeth always changed the subject or grew sad for days on end. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. She needed a distraction to keep her hands busy. Mr. Arthur arrived at 7:30 and found her already prepping the mise en place for lunch. "Good morning, Sarah. Sleep well?" "Sort of," she replied without looking at him. Mr. Arthur poured coffee for both of them and sat on the stool next to the kitchen counter. He was a man in his early 50s, divorced, who had inherited the restaurant from his father. He had always treated Sarah like a daughter, especially after he realized she had no family. "Sarah, about yesterday. If you want to talk, I'm here. Not to pry, but because I care about you." She stopped chopping the tomatoes and looked at him. Mr. Arthur had always been kind to her, never demanded explanations about her past, always respected her space. Maybe it was time to tell at least part of the truth. "My mother was German," she began slowly. "We came to the United States when I was little. She passed away when I was 17. "I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't know." "She never told me about her family in Germany. She always said we were alone in the world. That's why yesterday was so strange, finding out I have a grandmother." Mr. Arthur nodded, understanding the situation better. "And now? Are you going to look for this grandmother?" "I don't know. I'm afraid of what I might find." Their conversation was interrupted by the mailman's arrival. Mr. Arthur went to the door to get the mail and came back with a strange expression on his face. "Sarah, there's a letter here for you." She was surprised. She never got mail at the restaurant. Mr. Arthur handed her the envelope, and her blood ran cold. It was an elegant envelope, thick paper with a gold-embossed seal. The return address was written in Gothic letters, Martha Vogel. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in English, with the elegant handwriting of an elderly person. "My dear Sari, I don't know if you remember me, but I have never forgotten you. I am your grandmother Martha, your mother Elizabeth's mother. For more than 20 years, I've been searching for you two. I know your mother had her reasons for leaving, and I never judged her decision. But now, I really need to talk to you. I have important things to tell you about your family, about your history. If you can, come meet me this afternoon at 2 o'clock. The address is on the envelope. I will be waiting with a heart full of hope. With all my love, your Grandma Martha." Sarah had to sit down. Her legs went weak and she felt dizzy. Mr. Arthur rushed to help her, bringing a glass of water. "What happened? What does the letter say?" "It's my grandmother. She wants to see me today." Mr. Arthur looked at the clock. It was 9 in the morning. "Sarah, if you want to go, I'll let you leave early. I can manage lunch on my own." "I don't know if I have the courage," she admitted, her voice faint. "Why don't you have the courage?" Sarah looked at Mr. Arthur, wondering if she should tell him the whole truth. She decided to take a risk. "Because my mother fled Germany. She was terrified of something or someone. All through my childhood, she looked over her shoulder as if she were being hunted. I'm afraid to find out what she was running from." Mr. Arthur pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Sarah, you're 28 years old. You're grown up enough to face the truth, whatever it is. And look," he pointed to the letter, "your grandmother wrote that she doesn't judge your mother's decision. That doesn't sound like a bad person. But what if? And if I find out that my mother did something wrong, that's why she had to run away, then you'll deal with it. But what if you find out she was protecting you from something, or that there was a misunderstanding? You'll spend your whole life wondering." Sarah knew Mr. Arthur was right. Curiosity and the need for answers were greater than fear. "Will you come with me?" Mr. Arthur smiled. "If you want, of course I will." At exactly 2 in the afternoon, Sarah and Mr. Arthur stood in front of an elegant building on the Upper West Side. It was an old, well-maintained building with a uniformed doorman and a lobby decorated with plants. "Apartment 82, 8th floor," Sarah said, checking the letter again. In the elevator, she took deep breaths, trying to calm herself. Mr. Arthur held her hand, offering the silent support she so needed. When they reached the 8th floor, Sarah stopped in front of door 82. There was a small gold plaque with the name G. Vogel. She knocked with her knuckles, 3 soft taps. The door opened almost immediately, as if the person on the other side had been waiting right there. Sarah found herself facing an elderly woman with white hair, pulled into an elegant bun, blue eyes just like her mother's, and a smile that mixed joy and sadness. "Ach, mein Gott, Elizabeth," the woman whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. "You look exactly like your mother did when she was your age." "Mrs. Martha?" "Yes, my child, it's me. Come in, please, come in." The apartment was decorated with old, elegant furniture, with many photographs on the walls and some objects that seemed to have come from Germany. Sarah immediately noticed a large photo on the coffee table. A young blonde woman holding a small child. "That's you and your mother," Martha explained, following Sarah's gaze. "That photo was taken a few days before you left." Sarah approached the photo and felt her heart tighten. She vaguely remembered that day, sitting on her mother's lap in a garden full of flowers. "Please, sit down, I'll make some tea." While Martha prepared the tea in the kitchen, Sarah looked around the room. There was something familiar about it, as if she had been in that place before, even though she knew it was impossible. "Sarah," Mr. Arthur called softly, "look at this." He pointed to a bookshelf full of German books, and among them several leather-bound notebooks. Sarah walked over and saw that one of the notebooks was labeled, "Elizabeth Letters for Sari." "Grandma," Sarah called when Martha returned with the tea tray. "What is this?" Martha looked at the notebook in Sarah's hands and sighed. "Your mother wrote letters to you, for years. Even after you left, she would send me those letters, asking me to keep them until the day you two would meet again. She knew I would come back one day. She hoped. She always hoped." Martha poured the tea into delicate porcelain cups and sat in the armchair opposite the sofa where Sarah and Mr. Arthur were. "Sari, I need to tell you about what happened, about why your mother left." Sarah held the cup with both hands, trying to warm herself. Even though it was a summer afternoon, she felt cold. "Your mother fell in love with an American boy who was studying in Berlin. Your father's name was David. He was a young doctor, very intelligent and kind. They met at a university party, and it was love at first sight." Sarah felt her heart race. Finally, she would learn about her father. "The problem is that your mother was already promised in marriage to another man, Klaus Blackwood, the son of a very influential and conservative family. The engagement had been arranged by my husband, without Elizabeth's knowledge." "An arranged marriage?" Sarah could hardly believe it. "Yes, your grandfather believed it was best for Elizabeth, for our family, but when he found out about David, he became furious. He forbade Elizabeth from seeing him and moved up the wedding to Klaus." Martha paused to take a sip of tea, clearly emotional from the memories. "Elizabeth came to me desperate. She was pregnant with David, who had already returned to the United States. She cried every day, begged me to talk to her father, but he was adamant." "And you? What did you do?" I made a terrible mistake. I was afraid of my husband, afraid of the scandal. I tried to convince Elizabeth to marry Klaus and pretend that you were his daughter." Sarah felt her chest tighten. Her grandmother had tried to force her mother to live a lie. But Elizabeth was too brave for that. The night before the wedding, she ran away. She took you, who was only 2 years old, and left for the United States to find David. And she found my father." Martha lowered her eyes, clearly embarrassed. "No. When they arrived in the United States, they discovered that David had married someone else. Your mother was alone in a strange country, with a small child and knowing no one." Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her mother had sacrificed everything, left her entire family behind, and still hadn't found the happiness she was looking for. "For years I tried to find you. I hired detectives, wrote to the American consulate, but I couldn't find any leads. Your grandfather forbade any attempt at contact, saying Elizabeth had chosen her path." "And now, why were you able to find me now?" "Your grandfather passed away 3 years ago. Since then, I've done everything I can to find you. A detective managed to track Elizabeth to New York City, but when he got to the address," her voice broke. Sarah already knew what was coming. "She was no longer there," Sarah finished, her voice choked. "Yes, the detective discovered that she had passed away 10 years ago, but he managed to find information about you. He found out where you worked." Mr. Arthur, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "How did your grandmother get the restaurant's phone number?" The detective watched Sarah for a few days. He saw where she worked, talked to neighbors. He got the phone number and passed it to me yesterday morning. I couldn't wait. I called right away. Sarah got up and went to the window. The afternoon was sunny, but she felt as if she were in a storm. Her entire life, her entire story was being rewritten at that moment. "Sari," Martha called softly. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I want you to know that your mother was the bravest woman I have ever known. She gave up everything for love and for you. She suffered a lot because of the family," Sarah said without turning around. "Yes, she suffered, and I carry that guilt every day. That's why I need to give you something." Sarah turned and saw Martha pick up a wooden box from the shelf. "Your mother sent this to me 5 years ago, shortly before she passed away. She said it was for you to receive when you were found." Inside the box were several things: photographs, letters, a delicate bracelet, and a small notebook. "This notebook," Martha explained, "has the address of the last house where David lived. Elizabeth found out where he was shortly before she passed away. She wanted you to know about your father, if you ever wanted to look for him." Sarah picked up the notebook with trembling hands. There was the answer to a question that had haunted her for 24 years. Does he know I exist? We don't know. Elizabeth never managed to talk to him, but she found out that he divorced his first wife many years ago. He lives alone in a clinic in Aspen. The information made Sarah sit down again. Her father was just a few hours away, alive and apparently alone. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Grandma," Sarah said, using the German word for grandmother for the first time, "why do you want to see me now after so long?" Martha stepped closer and took Sarah's hands. "Because I'm old, my child. I'm 82 years old, and because I found out something about Klaus Blackwood, the man your mother was going to marry." "What did you find out?" "That he was violent. He beat his first wife, who ended up fleeing to another country. If your mother had married him—" She didn't finish the sentence. Sarah felt a chill. Her mother had made the right choice, even if she didn't know it at the time. "Your mother didn't run away on a whim, Sarah. She fled to protect the two of you, and it took me a long time to understand that." Arthur, who had followed the entire conversation in silence, finally spoke. "Sarah, your grandmother is right. Your mother was very brave." "I know," Sarah sighed. "I always knew she sacrificed a lot for me. I just didn't know how much." Martha opened the notebook of letters Elizabeth had written. "Can I read one to you?" Sarah nodded, even though she knew it would be emotionally hard. "Dear Sari, today you turned 15. I wish I could throw you a nice party, with lots of friends and presents. But I know you understand our situation. We bought a small cake at the bakery and celebrated just the two of us. You said it was the best birthday ever because you were with me. My heart nearly burst with love." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She remembered that birthday perfectly. She had lied to her mother, saying she was happy so as not to make her sad. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice coming to the United States. You could have had an easier life in Germany, even with Klaus. But then I look at you, see how kind and strong you are, and I know we took the right path. You are my greatest victory, my little one." Sarah couldn't hold back her sobs anymore. Arthur hugged her, letting her release all the pent-up emotion. "She loved me so much," Sarah sobbed. "More than anything in the world," Martha confirmed. "And you were the daughter she always dreamed of having." After Sarah calmed down, Martha took her to see the rest of the apartment. In the guest room, there was a bed made up with a delicate quilt and a dresser with some clothes. "I prepared this room for you," Martha said, "in case you want to stay here while you decide what to do." "Decide what to do?" "About your father, about your future. I know it's a lot to process in one day." Sarah looked at Arthur. "What do you think?" "I think you should meet your father, but on your own time when you feel ready. And about staying here, I don't know. I have my home, my job." "Of course," Martha said quickly. "I don't want to pressure you. I just want you to know you have a family here, that you're no longer alone in the world." The words touched Sarah deeply. For so long since her mother had passed, she felt orphaned of both parents, with no one in the world. Can I come visit you sometimes? It would be the greatest joy of my life." When they left the apartment, it was already almost 6 in the evening. Arthur suggested they go eat dinner somewhere quiet so Sarah could process everything she'd discovered. I can't believe that in one day my life completely changed, Sarah said, absently picking at her salad. Changed for the better, don't you think? I think so. It's scary, but good. I always felt incomplete, you know? Like a piece of the puzzle was missing. And now? Now I know I have a grandmother who loves me. I know the truth about my mother. And I know my father is alive. Arthur smiled. And are you going to look for him? Sarah grew thoughtful. I think so. But I'm afraid of his reaction. What if he doesn't want to meet me? What if he blames me for my mother disappearing? Sarah, you're not to blame for anything. You were just a baby when it all happened. I know, but what if he's built a new life? And if you don't want ghosts from the past showing up? Then you talk and find a way to deal with it. But what if he's always wondered about you? What if he's also alone and would like to have a daughter? The possibility hadn't occurred to Sarah. She'd always imagined her father had moved on and completely forgotten about Elizabeth. I think I need a few days to think. Of course, no rush. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual again. She needed to work, keep her hands busy while sorting out her thoughts. Mr. Arthur arrived at 8 and found her preparing an absurd amount of food. Sarah, what's this? Feeding an army. She stopped and looked at what she'd made. She really had overdone it. Sorry, I was on autopilot. Are you okay? I think so, just a lot to process. Mr. Arthur poured coffee for both of them and sat down next to her. Want to talk about something specific? I'm thinking about my father. Is he a good person? Did my mother not find him because he didn't want to be found? Or maybe she didn't find him because she didn't know how to look properly. Remember, she came to the United States alone, not knowing anyone, not knowing how things worked here. True, and back then there was no internet, all the conveniences we have today. Exactly. Maybe he also looked for her and couldn't find her. The possibility warmed Sarah's heart a little. Mr. Arthur, can I ask you a favor? Sure. If I go to Aspen to find my father, will you come with me? Mr. Arthur smiled. Of course, when do you want to go? This weekend? We can close the restaurant on Saturday. Done. Let's make that trip. On Friday, Sarah went to visit Mrs. Martha again. She wanted to tell her about her plans and ask for more information about David. I'm glad you decided to find him, said Mrs. Martha, serving tea and German cookies. I'm sure it's the right decision. Do you know anything else about him? Mrs. Martha went to the bookshelf and picked up a folder. The detective got some information. David is 55, a cardiologist, has a private practice in Aspen. He never had children with his ex-wife. Sarah took the folder and saw a recent photo of David. He was a handsome man with graying hair and kind eyes. There was something familiar about his face. Does he look like me? You have his eyes, and the smile too. Sarah looked more closely at the photo. There really were similarities. Grandma, can I take this picture? Of course, dear, and take this too. Mrs. Martha handed her a yellowed envelope. It's a picture of David and Elizabeth together, when they were dating in Berlin. Your mother sent it with her things. Sarah carefully opened the envelope. The photo showed a young couple embracing in a park. Elizabeth was radiant, with a smile Sarah had never seen before, and David looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. They loved each other a lot, Sarah remarked. A lot. That's why it was so hard for Elizabeth when she found out he had married someone else. Do you think he still thinks about her? I don't know, dear. But I think you'll find out on Saturday. On Saturday morning, Sarah and Mr. Arthur left early for Aspen. The car trip would take about 2 hours, enough time for Sarah to mentally rehearse what she would say. Are you nervous? Mr. Arthur asked when they stopped at a gas station. Very. What if he rejects me? Then you'll deal with it. But what if he's happy to meet you? I don't know which of those two options scares me more. Mr. Arthur laughed. Sarah, you're a strong, smart woman. It'll be fine. David's practice was on a quiet street in downtown Aspen. It was a small, elegant building with discreet signs at the entrance. Dr. David Harrison, cardiology, Sarah read. That's him. They parked in front of the clinic and stayed in the car for a few minutes, watching the movement. It was a Saturday, so there probably wasn't any service, but they saw a light on in one of the second-floor windows. Shall we? Arthur asked. Sarah took a deep breath. Let's go. The clinic's door was open, and there was a receptionist at the counter. Good morning, how can I help you? Good morning. We'd like to speak with Dr. David Harrison. It's a personal matter. The receptionist hesitated. The doctor isn't seeing patients today. He's just organizing some papers. Can I schedule an appointment for Monday? Actually, it's not a medical appointment, Arthur interjected. It's a very important family matter. Let me speak with him. The receptionist went upstairs, and they heard muffled voices talking. After a few minutes, she came back. The doctor will see you in his office. Second floor, first door on the right. Sarah climbed the stairs with trembling legs. When she reached the office door, she took another deep breath and knocked. Come in, said a male voice from the other side. Sarah opened the door and found herself face to face with the man from the photo. David Harrison was sitting behind a desk, looking at her curiously. When their eyes met, his expression changed completely. My God, he whispered, standing up slowly. Dr. David? My name is Sarah Miller. I am Elizabeth Vogel's daughter. David turned pale and had to lean on the desk. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other in silence. Elizabeth, he finally said, his voice choked. How is she? Where is she? Sarah felt her heart tighten. The moment had come to deliver the hardest news. Doctor, my mother, she passed away 10 years ago. David closed his eyes and covered his face with his hands. When he lowered them, tears were streaming down his face. I always knew that one day she would come looking for me. I always waited. She did look, Doctor. When she arrived in the United States, 26 years ago, she looked, but she found out you were married. David stared at her with utter confusion. Married? But I only got married 5 years after I arrived in the States, and only because I thought I'd never see Elizabeth again. Sarah felt the ground open beneath her feet. What do you mean? Sarah, I looked for your mother for years. I went back to Germany 3 times trying to find her. I was never married when I arrived in the States. I was alone for years waiting for her. Arthur stepped forward. Doctor, it seems there was a misunderstanding. Someone gave Elizabeth the wrong information. David sat down again, clearly shaken. Sarah, tell me everything. How did you end up in the States? What happened to Elizabeth? And you, my God, you are my daughter. Sarah told the whole story, from the escape from Germany to the meeting with Martha. David listened in silence, sometimes shaking his head in denial, other times wiping away tears. I never knew Elizabeth was pregnant when I came back to the States, he said when Sarah finished. If I had known, I never would have let her go through all that alone. Why didn't you go back to Germany sooner? My father was sick. I had to take care of him until he passed. When I finally managed to return to Germany, Elizabeth's family said you had disappeared. They said they didn't know where to. They lied, Sarah said, remembering the story Martha had told. Yes, they lied, and I believed them. I thought Elizabeth had decided to move on without me. David stood up and went to a bookshelf, taking out an old box. Sarah, can I show you something? He opened the box and revealed letters, photos, and other objects. These are letters I wrote to your mother over all these years. Letters I never sent because I didn't know where to find her. Sarah picked up one of the letters with trembling hands. It was dated only 2 years ago. My dear Elizabeth, today I thought of you all day. Do you still remember me? Are you happy wherever you are? I would so love to know if you had a good life, if you were loved as you deserved. And if we had a child, what would he be like today? Sarah couldn't continue reading. Tears made it impossible to see the words. Dad, she said, using the word for the first time. David opened his arms, and she threw herself into them, crying like she hadn't cried in years. He held her tight, whispering words of affection and asking forgiveness for not having been there. Arthur watched the scene, moved, happy to have accompanied Sarah in this moment. Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. That helps us beginners a lot. Now continuing. After they calmed down, David insisted they stay for lunch. He closed the clinic and took them to a cozy restaurant in the city center. Sarah, tell me about your life. What do you do? How are you? I'm a cook. I've been working at Arthur's restaurant for 5 years. A cook? David smiled. Elizabeth always loved to cook. She made the best German dishes I've ever tasted. She taught me some recipes. It's one of the few things I remember her doing with joy. And do you like it? Cooking, I mean. I love it. It's my passion. David looked at Arthur. And you, Arthur? How did you meet Sarah? She showed up at my restaurant 5 years ago looking for a job. It was a tough time for her. She was alone in the world. I kind of adopted her as a daughter. Thank you, David said, shaking Arthur's hand. Thank you for taking care of her when I couldn't. She's a special person. She deserved to have a family. David turned to Sarah. And now she does. She has me. She has her grandmother. She'll never be alone again. Sarah smiled, feeling a happiness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course you can ask anything. Why did you never have other children? David lowered his eyes. I tried. I married a good woman when I was 35, but I could never forget Elizabeth, and she could never get pregnant. We got divorced 10 years ago because we realized we were trying to force something that wasn't there. I'm sorry. Don't be. Now I understand that everything happened as it should. If I'd had other children, maybe I wouldn't value finding you so much. During lunch, they talked about everything. David's life, the memories he had of Elizabeth, Sarah's plans for the future. Sarah, would you like to come live here in Aspen? I have a big house with plenty of space. Sarah looked at Arthur, uncertain. I don't know. My whole life is in New York City. Of course, I understand. You don't have to decide now. But I want you to know you'll always have a place here. And if I wanted to visit more often, spend some weekends here, that would be perfect. We can get to know each other little by little. In the late afternoon, as they were getting ready to return to New York City, David handed Sarah an envelope. These are photos of you and Elizabeth that I managed to gather over the years, and there's something I want you to take. He took off a necklace from around his neck with a small pendant. It was your mother's. She forgot it at my house in Berlin when she left. I kept it all these years, hoping to give it back to her. Now I want you to have it. Sarah held the pendant carefully. It was a small heart, simple, but very delicate. Dad, I want to come here next weekend, and I want to bring my grandmother to meet you. David smiled. It would be an honor to meet Elizabeth's mother. On the trip back, Sarah was visibly lighter. Arthur noticed the change in her expression, her posture. How do you feel? Complete. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. And now, what's the next step? I want to bring my family together. Dad, Grandma. I want them to meet. And I want to learn more about my German roots. And the restaurant. Sarah grew thoughtful. Arthur, can I make you a proposal? Sure. How about we expand the menu? Include some German dishes, do a fusion of American and German cuisine. Arthur smiled. I love the idea. It'll give the restaurant a unique edge. And that way I can honor my mother's memory and still stay close to you who are my chosen family. On Monday, Sarah called Martha to tell her about the meeting with David. Her grandmother was moved to learn that he had spent all those years searching for Elizabeth. What a tragedy, said Martha. If they had found each other, it would have been a completely different story. But if they had found each other, maybe I wouldn't be who I am today. My mother taught me to be strong, to fight for what I want. That made me who I am. You're right, dear. Elizabeth would be very proud of the woman you've become. Grandma, do you want to meet my father? On Saturday, we're all going to Aspen. It would be an honor to meet the man who made my daughter so happy. During the week, Sarah worked with renewed enthusiasm at the restaurant. She started researching German recipes and adapting traditional dishes to the American palate. Arthur, look at this Sauerbraten I adapted. Instead of using German vinegar, I used American wine vinegar, and instead of serving it with spätzle, I'm going to make it with sweet potato mash." Arthur tasted the dish and his eyes lit up. "Sarah, this is incredible. It's a perfect fusion. And this Brazilian-style schnitzel? Instead of veal, I used chicken fillet, and the breading has cassava flour mixed with wheat flour. Let's launch a special menu, flavors of longing, dishes that tell your story." The idea excited Sarah. It was a way to honor her roots and at the same time celebrate the United States that had welcomed her. On Saturday, Sarah, Arthur, and Martha left for Aspen. Martha looked elegant in a navy blue dress and a wool coat. She had dressed up especially to meet David. "I'm nervous," she confessed during the trip. "Why, Grandma?" "Because this man loved my daughter more than anything, and I was one of the people responsible for separating them." Sarah held her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, the past is the past. What matters is that we're all here now." David was waiting for them at the entrance of the clinic. When he saw Martha, he approached respectfully. "Mrs. Martha, it's an honor to meet you." "Dr. David, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for loving my daughter the way she deserved." They greeted each other with the respectful formality of people from different generations, but Sarah noticed there was an immediate connection between them. David took them to his house, a cozy building with a flower garden and a view of the mountains. "Elizabeth would love this place," Martha commented, looking at the garden. "I think about that every day," David replied. "Every flower I plant thinking of her." During lunch, Martha told stories from Elizabeth's childhood, and David shared memories of the time they spent together in Berlin. Sarah listened, fascinated, learning sides of her mother she had never imagined. "Elizabeth was as stubborn as you, Sarah," said Martha. "When she made up her mind about something, there was no force in the world that could change it. I remember the first time I saw her," David recounted. "It was at a university party. She was arguing with a professor about German philosophy, defending her ideas with such passion that everyone stopped to listen." "And you fell in love instantly?" asked Sarah. "Instantly. I thought, this woman is special. I want to get to know her better." Martha smiled sadly. "If I had been less cowardly, if I had stood up to my husband, the two of you could have been happy together." David shook his head. "Mrs. Martha, don't blame yourself. We lived in a different time with different values. The important thing is that Elizabeth raised a wonderful daughter, and now we have a chance to be a family. Do you forgive me for having been neglectful, for not protecting Elizabeth when she needed it?" David stood up and hugged Martha. "There's nothing to forgive. Elizabeth made her own decisions, and they brought her here to Sarah, and Sarah brought us back to each other." That afternoon, the four of them walked through downtown Aspen, visiting the craft shops and drinking hot chocolate. Sarah watched David and Martha chatting animatedly and felt filled with a happiness she had never experienced. "Arthur," she whispered, "thank you for encouraging me to go on this search. Thank you for having the privilege of accompanying this journey." At the end of the day, as they prepared to return to New York City, David made a proposal. "Sarah, how about we organize a special dinner next week? You can cook some of those fusion dishes you created, and we can invite some close people to celebrate our reunited family." "I love the idea. I can do it at the restaurant on a night we're closed to the public." "Perfect. And Mrs. Martha, I would like you to consider spending more time here in Aspen. I have a guest room that's never used." Martha looked at the mountains and then at David. "You know, Doctor, maybe that's a good idea. New York City is getting too hectic for a lady of my age." Sarah smiled. Her family was forming naturally, each piece finding its place. The following week, Sarah dedicated herself intensely to preparing the special dinner. She decided to make a menu that told her story through flavors. For an appetizer, she prepared a traditional German bread that her mother had taught her, accompanied by American pâtés made with local fruits. The main course would be the American-style sauerbraten she had created, accompanied by a cassava flour porridge seasoned with German herbs. For dessert, a bold fusion, Black Forest cake with American fruits instead of German cherries. "Sarah, this menu is incredible," said Arthur, tasting the preparations. "Each dish tells a piece of your journey." "That's exactly what I want, for people to feel the story through the food." On the night of the dinner, the restaurant was decorated with wildflowers and candles. In addition to David and Martha, Sarah had invited some special customers who had become friends over the years. When everyone was gathered, Sarah made a toast. "I want to thank you all for being here today. For a long time I thought family was something I didn't have. But I discovered that family is not just those who share your blood. Family is those who are by your side in difficult times, who celebrate your victories, who love you as you are." She looked at Arthur. "Arthur was my chosen family for 5 years. He gave me work when I needed it, offered me friendship when I was alone." Then she looked at Martha. "Grandma gave me back my history, my roots. She showed me that my mother was the brave woman I always imagined her to be." Finally, she looked at David. "And Dad gave me the certainty that I was wanted, that I was the result of true love." Everyone was moved when Sarah finished speaking. David stood up. "Sarah, for 28 years I thought about what it would be like to have a daughter. I imagined if she would be intelligent, if she would be kind, if she would be strong. You are all that and much more. I am the proudest father in the world." Martha also wanted to speak. "My granddaughter, you are proof that the best things in life come from the most difficult situations. Elizabeth would be radiant with pride seeing the woman you have become." When dinner was over, the guests praised not only the food but the story behind each dish. A few asked if Sarah had ever thought about writing a cookbook to tell her journey. "A cookbook?" said Sarah, surprised by the suggestion. "Why not?" encouraged David. "Your story is inspiring and your recipes are unique." Arthur got excited about the idea. "Sarah, we could even expand the restaurant. Create a space for cooking classes where you could teach those fusions you've created." The idea planted a seed in Sarah's mind. Maybe she could do more than just cook for the restaurant's customers. Maybe she could teach other people to find their own roots through food. In the following months, Sarah's life completely transformed. Martha moved to Aspen and became a constant presence in David's life. The two developed a deep friendship, united by the love they had for Elizabeth and for Sarah. Sarah began spending every weekend in Aspen, strengthening her relationship with her father and grandmother. During the week, she dedicated herself to the restaurant and started writing down her recipes and the story behind each one. Arthur became not only her business partner, but also her best friend and advisor. Together, they began planning the restaurant's expansion. "Sarah, an interesting proposal came in today," said Arthur on a Wednesday afternoon. "What kind of proposal?" "A publisher wants to release your cookbook, and a culinary school wants you to give lectures on fusion cuisine." Sarah could hardly believe it. "Really?" "Very serious. Your story has touched many people. The recipes you created are unique, and the way you tell your journey through food is inspiring." That evening, Sarah called David to share the news. "Dad, I never imagined my life could change so much in such a short time. Sarah, your mother always said that when a person finds their true path, the universe conspires to help them. I think you found your path." "What path?" "The path of bringing people together through food, of showing that our differences can complement each other instead of separating us. Your recipes do that. They take ingredients from different countries and create something new and delicious." Her father's observation made Sarah reflect on the true meaning of her journey. It wasn't just about finding her biological family, but about discovering her life's mission. 6 months after her first meeting with Martha, Sarah organized a special party. It was to celebrate the launch of her book, Flavors of Longing, A Culinary Journey Home. The party took place at the restaurant, which had been renovated and expanded. Now it had a space dedicated to cooking classes and a small museum with Sarah's personal items, family photos, and the story behind each recipe. "Sarah," said one of the guests, an elderly woman who had been coming to the restaurant for years, "your story inspired me to look for my family in Italy. My parents came to the United States when I was a baby, and I never knew what happened to the relatives who stayed behind." "And did you find them?" "I did. I discovered I have cousins in Rome. I'm going to visit them next month, and I'll take some American recipes to teach them." Sarah was moved to realize that her story was encouraging other people to seek their roots and value their origins. During the party, David surprised Sarah. He had hired a musician to play a German song that Elizabeth loved. "I remember her singing this song while she cooked," he said. "She always said that one day she would teach it to our daughter." Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the melody. For a moment, she felt as if her mother were there, finally at peace, seeing that her daughter had found her place in the world. Martha approached her during the music. "Grandma, do you think my mother would be proud?" "My dear, I'm sure she is proud. You took all the pain, all the longing, all the love she kept in her heart, and turned it into something beautiful. You turned it into connection, into family, into purpose." At the end of the party, when everyone had already left, Sarah, Arthur, David, and Martha sat together at the restaurant. "Do you know what moves me most about this whole story?" said Sarah. "What?" asked Arthur. "It's that my mother always told me you build family where you plant love. She planted love in me, and I planted love in the people around me. And now we have this beautiful family, which grew in a way she could never have imagined." David smiled. "Elizabeth was always wise, and you inherited that wisdom." "And now?" asked Martha. "What are the next plans?" Sarah looked around the restaurant at the people she loved, at the space that had become much more than a workplace. "I want to expand the cooking classes, teach more people to find their roots through food. And I want to travel, get to know other stories like mine." "Travel where?" asked Arthur. "To Germany. I want to see the place where my mother grew up, where she and my dad met. I want to close the circle of the story." David took her hand. "And I'll go with you. It's time for me to revisit my past as well, but this time with you by my side." 2 years later, Sarah was at the Berlin airport, accompanied by David and Martha. It was the first time they had returned to Germany together, and the emotion was palpable. "Ready?" asked David, holding her hand. "Ready," replied Sarah, taking a deep breath. They visited the university where Elizabeth and David had met, walked through the park where they took the photo that Sarah kept with care, and went to the house where Elizabeth had grown up. The house now belonged to a young family, but the new owners allowed them to enter and see the place. Sarah went up to the room that had been her mother's and stood at the window, imagining Elizabeth there, dreaming of the future, in love with David. "Mum," she whispered, "we made it. We managed to be happy." That night, at a traditional German restaurant in Berlin, Sarah prepared a special meal for David and Martha. She used recipes she had learned from her mother, adapted with original German ingredients. "This sauerbraten tastes exactly like Elizabeth used to make," said Martha with tears in her eyes. "And this bread." David closed his eyes, savoring. "It's just like what she gave me when we went on picnics in the park." Sarah smiled, feeling that she had completed a journey that had started long before she was born. When they returned to the United States, Sarah brought with her not only memories, but also inspiration for new projects. She opened a cooking school that offered classes on cultural fusion through food. The project became a success, attracting people from all nationalities living in New York City. Arthur became her official partner at the school, and together they developed a culinary exchange program where American students could travel to other countries to learn traditional techniques, and foreigners came to the United States to learn regional cuisine. David sold his clinic in Aspen and moved to New York City, where he opened a smaller practice and began dedicating more time to family. He and Martha became the adoptive grandparents of several of Sarah's school students, especially those who, like her, had no family in the United States. One winter evening, 5 years after the first phone call, Sarah was at home preparing dinner when her cell phone rang. It was a young Italian woman who had taken classes at the school. "Sarah, I made it. I found my family in Sicily through the recipes you taught me. My great-grandmother was still alive and taught me the original recipe for the pasta that my grandmother used to make here in the United States." Sarah smiled, feeling that familiar happiness that came whenever her story inspired someone to find their roots. "Julia, how wonderful. Tell me everything." As she listened to the young woman's story, Sarah looked out the window and saw David arriving for dinner, carrying flowers for Mrs. Martha, who now lived in the apartment next door to hers. Mr. Arthur was coming right behind, bringing a bottle of wine and his usual smile. Her family was complete, not the way she had imagined as a child, but in an even more beautiful way. It was a family built with love, patience, forgiveness, and second chances. When she hung up the phone, Sarah went back to the kitchen and continued preparing dinner. On the menu for the evening, sauerbraten American style, mashed sweet potato with German herbs, and for dessert, a chocolate cake that mixed German techniques with American cocoa. As she cooked, she hummed the German song her mother loved, and for the first time in many years, she felt Elizabeth present, not as a painful longing, but as a loving presence that approved of the choices her daughter had made. "Thank you, Mom," Sarah whispered, stirring the sauce with care, "for being brave enough to start over, for teaching me that family is who we choose to love, and for planting seeds of love that keep blooming to this day." That night's dinner was like all the others that followed, full of laughter, stories, plans for the future, and above all, full of love. The kind of love that transcends blood, nationality, or circumstances. The kind of love that builds real families. And Sarah finally understood that her journey had never been about finding a lost family. It had been about discovering that family is something you build every day, with small gestures, constant care, and open hearts. Her mother had started that construction long ago, when she decided to protect her daughter above all else. Sarah just continued the work, expanding the family to include all those who needed a place to belong. End of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this emotional journey of Sarah. Have you ever been through a similar situation of family reunion? Leave your comment sharing your opinion and your own experiences. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.